Over the entire league history of the National Football League, there's been really a handful of teams that you could really consider as NFL royalty and as the teams who really, when you think about the league history of the NFL, you would be nowhere without these teams. Teams like the Packers, the Cowboys, the Steelers, the Patriots, the Bears, and even the Las Vegas Raiders, who at one point were the LA Raiders, at one point were the Oakland Raiders, and at this point, with the recent Jon Gruden scandal, they have really taken themselves out of the royalty of the NFL with how they handled the situation. Now, I'm just like you. I don't necessarily know the entirety of the situation. However, I probably, just like you as well, read the entire New York Times Post, have heard everything that has come from the NFL Network or ESPN about this situation, and I'm still kind of developing my own thoughts on the situation. However, at the same time, there's a few things that need to be discussed when talking about this Jon Gruden scandal and what it means not only for the Raiders but for the league going forward. One thing to remember is this was not really even supposed this investigation was not supposed to involve Jon Gruden really at all. This was an investigation into the Washington football team, into Daniel Snyder, into Bruce Allen, and a lot of other members of the Washington football team who used to be the Washington Redskins. At this time, Jon Gruden wasn't really involved in it until he was seen as one of the members of a huge chain of something like 650,000 emails involving Gruden, involving members of the Washington football team, involving members of like presidents of other companies, like companies that are in the food industry, companies that run the Outback Bowl for college football, companies who are just like, they don't really necessarily have to do with football. And once those emails were given to the New York Times, once those emails were kind of leaked out, and once it was found out what Jon Gruden was saying about members of the black community, about members of the gay community, about members in the NFL like Roger Goodell and DeMaurice Smith, who was the NFLPA, I believe the vice president. He was at least an executive in the NFLPA. And just everything that's come out about what Jon Gruden was saying in those emails, and that's not even everything that I said so far is not even everything. There's some things that I don't really want to talk about. What Jon Gruden and members of the Washington football team and others in that email chain were sending to each other. All of that isn't even the tip of the iceberg with what is really bad about what Jon Gruden was saying in those emails. Now, this was in the middle of about a 5-year stretch for the NFL that was really, really poor in terms of the whole thing about the NFL is you got to protect the shield. You have to make sure that the name NFL is not tarnished by the conduct that you are doing personally or as a team. During this time, you have the New Orleans Saints just coming off their bounty scandal. It had just ended around the time that these emails had just begun with Jon Gruden and the Washington football team. You have the CTE movement and the movement by Roger Goodell to try to improve player safety, to try to improve just the name around football in terms of a safety standpoint, not only just in the NFL, but trying to lead the charge for high school, for middle school, for youth football, for any age of football. Roger Goodell was trying to improve the safety of the game. You have, a few years later, you have the Ray Rice scandal. I don't know when the Riley Cooper incident happened at some sort of country concert. I believe is around the same time. You have a lot of scandals within a 4 to 5 year stretch that I didn't even mention yet. And this was kind of smack dab in the middle of it. And not only did it start in 2011, it led up basically to when Jon Gruden got the job in 2018 for the Las Vegas, then Oakland Raiders. There's so many layers to this about the players in Las Vegas that you can't help but just feel terrible for the players of Las Vegas. And this is nothing to do with a football standpoint. This is everything to do with a respect standpoint. People that don't follow the NFL are going to see this and just assume that the Las Vegas Raiders are an embarrassment to the NFL. They're going to assume that the Las Vegas Raiders are a disgrace, And they're going to disrespect the Las Vegas Raiders from here on out just based off what they know from this situation. But like I said earlier, the Las Vegas Raiders are not that kind of franchise. They are one of, if not the royalty of the NFL. Even though they don't have the Super Bowls that the Patriots have, even though they don't have the names that the San Francisco 49ers have, they are still one of, if not the greatest franchises in NFL history just off the fact that, their fan base is incredible. They have one of the best, if not the best fan bases in the NFL. They have always been a player in the NFL. They've always been just one of the best names in the NFL, regardless of who was on their team. And they're always going to be a star in the NFL when you look at the history of the National Football League. But now there's a stain on the franchise. And they did it to themselves because of the fact that they had these emails before this past Sunday's game against the Chicago Bears. In fact, I believe they had them. If you go by what is said in the New York Times Post and you go by what is said by multiple reporters around the situation, they had these emails as early as Friday. And you can say, well, you don't want to ruin the players' chances of winning a game on Sunday. You don't want to blah, blah, blah. That has nothing to do with it. That really shouldn't have anything to do with it because the Raiders, like I said, are an organization who throughout the history of the NFL has always shown a forward-thinking mindset and has always shown an ability to make moves when they see fit. And it's just rough to see that they did not make a move to part ways with Jon Gruden before this past Sunday's game. And for the players, this really isn't something that I thought about until I heard people talking about it on TV yesterday. What does someone like Carl Nassib do around this situation? The first, openly active gay player in NFL history. What does that do for him? Does he this is a man who entrusted in Jon Gruden throughout the past year or so that he was with the Las Vegas Raiders. This is a man who was talking to Jon Gruden every single day, who seemed like Jon Gruden was on the same page as him in terms of a football standpoint, in terms of a humanity standpoint, in terms of, this is just a guy that Carl Nassib had to trust every single day. And then you talk about someone like Derek Carr. Derek Carr is the secondary face of the franchise behind Jon Gruden, and Jon Gruden has completely disgraced and embarrassed the entire organization of the Las Vegas Raiders. Now Derek Carr has to lead this franchise throughout the rest of the season, and that's a really tough thing to do. Not only you're losing your head coach, you're inheriting a franchise who just recently had one of the biggest scandals of the past 10 years laid down upon him. And now he has to lead the franchise through it. Just anyone that's on the team that is African American, what are they supposed to believe about this situation? What are they supposed to think? Anyone on the team in general, what are they supposed to think? Because, the player conduct policy, I would say that everyone on the Las Vegas Raiders has fulfilled the player conduct policy through and through. Everyone on that Las Vegas Raiders team is a model citizen, and a majority of the players in the NFL are pretty much model citizens. You have the 5% of guys who have off-the-field issues. You have the 5% of guys who do things that are not good for the team or the league, and that's why they have repercussions for it. It's just like life. There's going to be someone who ends up doing the wrong thing. I wouldn't say anyone on this Las Vegas Raiders team has done that. And now their head coach, who is preaching to them that same policy, who's preaching to them, just being the right, accountable kind of guy in the locker room, their head coach, who is preaching those same exact qualities to them, has just resigned because of the fact that he did not even follow up on those policies 10 years ago. And it's not even 10 years ago. It was up to 2018, maybe just a few months before he got the job. And there's things that Jon Gruden was talking about that just they don't have to do with football at all. They really don't. It's things like talking about female referees in the NFL and disgracing that. Things like player safety. Things like players standing up for, movements that they believe in, whether they're, everything that Jon Gruden was talking about in those emails that he was, trying to throw a bad rap on. Everything about that is anti what he more than likely was teaching and preaching in his locker room. And that's just being inclusive to everyone around you. That's being respectful of everyone around you. That's giving your heart, your best effort in every single moment of life that you can. Jon Gruden just disgraced that in front of his entire locker room. And like I said, it wasn't just 10 years ago. It was in 2018, just a few months before he got the job. And even if it was only 10 years ago, that doesn't make anything okay. And I guarantee if these emails had been public before Jon Gruden got his job with the Raiders, he wouldn't have got the job. We wouldn't be talking about Jon Gruden right now. Yeah. With all that being said, that's going to be the video for me. Kind of a different video. This is probably one of the more serious videos I've ever had to make about the NFL or just sports in general. Didn't really want to make this video because it's not something that is really, it's just not a happy thing for this league. And if you're like me, you want to see everything go well in the NFL. I'm a fan of the Houston Texans, but I want to see every 32 team be competing for a Super Bowl. I want to see every single team as good as possible, and not only just on the field but off the field as well. And this is a really big problem for the NFL right now, and this will be probably a big problem going forward for the rest of this year as they discuss, why didn't the NFL just come down on Jon Gruden and the Las Vegas Raiders about this situation. I understand that the NFL usually just relies on the team to make that decision, but at the same time, this was a decision that should not have been in the hands of the Las Vegas Raiders. This should have just been handled by the league and Roger Goodell. So with all that being said, again, that's going to be the video for me. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you leave a like. If you didn't, make sure you leave a dislike. Any feedback from you at this point is much appreciated. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.